Hi everyone and welcome to this interview with Imogen Edmunds from Red Wing. Imogen, do you want to just say hi and explain to everyone a little bit about what it is that you do and what the team at Red Wing do?
Hi, yes, my name's Imogen. I am the Managing Director of Red Wing Solutions. We are a HR and training company based in Worcestershire that specialises in early years. So myself and my small team of 5, we're all working from home currently, but we work with day nurseries, preschools and out of schools clubs, day in, day out, 51 weeks of the year.
Sounds fantastic. And I think what we're going to be talking about today is just a little bit, I think the word of the times a few weeks ago, over the last few months has definitely been furlough. And I know that it's still very much the word of the times, but the word that you're talking about a lot right now is reboarding, which I also like. And maybe just a good place to start is to explain kind of what you think about reboarding and why you think everyone needs to be shifting to thinking about what reboarding means for their early years setting.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, there are people using the term reboarding. I didn't invent it. If you think about the notion of onboarding, very much perhaps a term that we associate with an American version of induction, perhaps in this country. But you know, this is just the notion that we're getting people back to work. That's what we mean by reboarding. I like to describe it as if, you know, you're on a cruise ship, you've stopped off at a nice location, you've been allowed to get off and have your feet back on land, and you've gone about your sightseeing, and then you're reboarding the cruise ship. Or ever since the day your staff went home, whether you furloughed them or whether they started working from home, they needed to reboard your ship at some point. So what many people have been doing, and since the moment they sent their staff home, if you like, have been thinking about how they're going to get them back. And we knew that at Red Wing. So before we were told, I think it was a Sunday evening, wasn't it, where before Boris stood up at tea time a couple of Sundays ago and said, look, you are going to go back to work from the 1st of June if you're in early years or if you're in a primary school for certain years. You're not going to go back before the 1st of June, but you're going to go back from the 1st of June. Before that, we knew at some point our clients and our potential clients were going to have staff that needed to go back to work. So we've been thinking about how we can best support employers in the sector to reboard their staff in the most effective way, because it was always going to happen, and now we know it'll happen quite shortly.
And just, I think, so we have kind of a good basis for the rest of the discussion that we want to have around bringing people back. Where, from your perspective and your understanding of all the current guidance, are we at with furlough right now, and what it's going to be and what it's going to mean in terms of what we can access as employers over the next few months into the kind of, I think, is it August at the moment that they're talking about it being kind of the final point for now?
It's a really good question, Matt. And you know, there is a degree that we just don't know. We were told, and it's Rishi Sunak, when he stands up, we have to listen, because he's going to talk about the job retention scheme. None of the other ministers are allowed to talk about it, only the Chancellor. And when he stood up last and said that he was extending the scheme, remember, he's already extended it once. This was a 3-month scheme when it was first announced upon us on March 2020. I think it was the 20th of March. It was a 3-month scheme. And so it was March, April, May. So initially it would have ended at the end of next week. Then he extended it to the end of June, and that was his first extension. That was just a straightforward, look, we're not ready for it to end on the end of May. We'll give you until the end of June. We all then went and said, well, it'll definitely end at the end of June then. Because, you know, you assume, don't you, that it's not going to be able to be financed indefinitely. Then he's recently come out and said, look, I'll extend it to the end of July, but then from July, I'm going to expect employers to pay towards the furlough scheme. I expect employers to contribute their bit, and I'll extend the scheme from August right through to October, but from August, you'll be paying your bit. Now, he did say when he stood up and said that, he'd let us know at the end of May. Now, next week we have a bank holiday on a Monday, don't we? Rishi likes to stand up on a Tuesday. So my money, and I'm not a betting woman, but if I would be on Tuesday night at tea time, Rishi, well, probably not even at tea time, during the day, because I think he'll do it in the Commons first. I think he'll announce it in the Commons. It won't be one of the press type scenario things, that daily media briefings that, you know, really isn't for that sort of subject. It's for Parliament. I think during the day on Tuesday, there's a pretty good chance he'll stand up and talk about what employers' contribution from the 1st of April might look like. And he's at the same time suggesting that employers might be able to get staff to work part-time. Because remember, the reason why they want to end the job retention scheme is because they need to get the economy moving again. We need to think about the wealth of the nation. And if people are furloughed and not going to work, employers are not able to get people to generate money for the economy.
And I think it's fair to say that we're going to, we all know that whatever business, whether it's you're a restaurant or an early years setting, what we're going to see with people is, to begin with, people are going to be accessing your service at a slightly different rate than normal. We saw a lot of studies come out over the last few weeks about how many parents are going to want to access childcare at the very beginning of June, and we know it's not going to be full. So I think it's definitely fair to say that what they're planning with this, hopefully, is this idea that we'll keep kind of supporting you as you bring your staff back in a slightly staged way. And that's kind of hopefully how you're going to continue to access it over the next few months. Is that kind of your best understanding of it as well?
It is, and there's no guarantee about the 1st of June. And all of this uncertainty helps no business owner, whether you're a business owner hoping to get your staff back to work because they've now got childcare, or whether you are the childcare business hoping to provide a service to your parents. Lack of clarity helps no one. And we really don't know whether we will be in a position to open in a week's time, just over a week's time, because there is always that threat of, it'll be depending on the science at the time. And if the R number goes up, there is a suggestion that perhaps they'll pull the decision. If track and trace doesn't come online, there is that possibility that they'll pull the decision. So we're all really waiting. And I think many parents have been asked by their providers what their intentions are for the 1st of June. Now, you've got the camp that tells you, hell yes, you're having my child back. There's no way that me and this child can possibly be at home any longer together. And then you've got the camp that says, no, we'll be back, perhaps when there's a vaccine. You've got the range of people in between. And some people are just waiting and seeing. And what really breaks my heart for some providers is that, potentially they're being asked to rota for the week, for just over a week's time for their staff to be in work, providing a service to children. And nobody knows until that child gets out of that car seat and goes in through that front door whether that child's coming in today. Because it only needs to take for that child to have a temperature that day, for that adult to be not feeling it about going out in the car and dropping their child off. Maybe the one parent thought that it was a great idea and the other parent thought, no, it's my parents, spoke to my best mate, not so sure I want to do it. So you could end up with a situation where the provider staffs it for 10 children, 2 turn up. And I feel for providers, because without the lack of clarity, without the DfE perhaps stepping in earlier and saying, this is what we can help you to do to prepare to reopen, without everybody giving everybody the information on the same day, everyone's working at different levels, and it doesn't help the staff, it doesn't help the providers, it doesn't help the parents, and it won't help the children.
And so on that note, how are you kind of recommending at the moment that people approach when you're having these conversations and people are, as you say, waiting on guidance? There's only so much guidance we can get, understanding what are you kind of recommending to providers when it comes to staffing and how they approach staffing if they are thinking about trying to reopen more fully?
Well, there's a few things that I would recommend, and the overriding aim, the overriding ethos to all of our advice is talk to your staff. The psychological contract is so very important, and once that's severed or damaged in some way, it's really difficult for an employer to get that back. So keeping the lines of communication is incredibly important, and talking to your staff. Now, I think many providers will be planning for the 1st of June or from the 1st of June, if that's the decision they've taken. Remember, they don't have to reopen on the 1st of June. They can put it back for as long as they deem appropriate, but they can't open before. They'll be planning to do so, and they're probably in an ideal situation will have spoken to the staff about who fancies coming back. There are people who will volunteer quite readily to return to work. They are not finding it easy being at home. They would quite like to be back into the routine of work, quite like to be out of their homes, back to normal, good for themselves and good for their bank balances to be back earning their money, and they'll be keen to get back to work. There's those superstars that we talk about in my book, little plug there. Those are the ones that are going to be perhaps the first back through your door. They've probably already been telling you that they want to come back through the door in their actions, even though you've not been able to get them working whilst they've been furloughed. those are the ones I would start with. And then obviously keeping the conversation with the others that perhaps need you to talk to them about the provisions you put in place, the social distancing strategies, the PPE, the signage, the things you've done, the number of children. I always think one of the greatest things that's make people feel anxious about going back to work is thinking that when you get there, your normal workload's going to be there, or, it's going to be, I'll forget how to do it. And I need to be reassured that, you won't have forgotten what the routines are. You won't have forgotten what to do. And guess what? There won't be the number of children in that building as there were when we closed the nursery or closed the setting in March. They just need reassurance. We might have 3 children in. We'll be doing X, we'll be doing Y. We've got all this in place. Do you want to see it? Let's involve the staff and reassure people. And that's my best advice, is talk. You can never talk too much.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think something we talked about a little bit earlier was just about, before this call, was just a little bit about the fact that a lot of people are obviously planning a lot of health and safety considerations right now and really caught up in a lot of these issues. But if you're not focusing on your staff right now and that communication, that's your key asset right now. So I think also I'd love to hear a little bit about how you think we providers need to be focusing on putting their staff well-being, reassuring their staff, making sure all their team are ready to come back. That has to kind of be almost the first port of call right now.
Yeah, let me tell you a little story. I'm a really old lady, and many, many years ago, I had a boss called Tim. And Tim was the sort of guy that got it wrong, shall we say. Really had a heart of gold, but he got it wrong. And Tim would like to tell us we'd done really well. We were quite a young team. And I remember the one day where he realised that because of my role in HR, and he hadn't had a HR before, that if he wanted to give me a cuddle, I might not be over impressed to be cuddled by a middle-aged man. So he invented what he called a virtual hug, and he would hug himself and say, look, I'm giving you a hug, but this is a virtual hug because I can't hug you because you're in HR. And way back before it became, Me Too or any of these issues. But now is very much a time where we can't reach out to our staff and give them a hug, no matter how much we want, but we can give a virtual one like Tim. And this is the time to reach out to your staff and make them feel like they are your most important priority. Because if you've got 2 jobs, one being speak to your staff and the other one being update your COVID policy or, write some procedures of what to do if, the phone call with the staff is the most important priority out of those 2. And if we don't, you could end up with a wonderful set of policies, but no staff in your nursery to look after your children.
And I think that's something I'd love to expand on a little bit more, because we talked a little bit earlier about the reality of how to choose the staff that come back after a staged return. And you talked about the most simple thing you can do, of course, is just to ask them who wants to come back. And that's, if that works out really well for you, that's fantastic. But we do have to also be realistic that a lot of providers are going to have staff that for a whole range of reasons might be uncomfortable with coming back. It could be their own concerns about their family, concerns, of course, about the infection and what going back to work might mean for them. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on how you work with staff on that, those staff who maybe you might need to come back or need to start encouraging to come back if they are feeling a little bit unsure about coming back.
Yeah, I mean, we know that some people, it's not safe for them to return to work, and they should be the last on your list. And over the coming weeks, I think there'll be more guidance available to help employers address when somebody says, look, I'm not coming back. I can't come back, or I'm not coming back because of X or Y. But those people in the middle that just need you to help them to come back, those are what we really prioritise from a HR perspective now. And there's a few things you can do. You can do a pre-return to work conversation. And this is something that we include in our reboarding pack, guidance on things that you can do when you call your staff to talk to them about the idea of coming back to work. Some providers have chosen to do a questionnaire to accompany. I think it doesn't replace the pre-return conversation. It's about making people very much feel that they can talk. Because if you did it on a Zoom call, and lots of people are, you know what any staff meeting's like? You end up having a staff meeting, don't you? And you say, has there anybody got any questions? And there's always one that's quite happy to speak up in front of everybody. They love the limelight and they're very, very confident. And that's great. What I always found as a manager when I did staff meetings is you get nothing when you asked if anyone had any questions. And then you'd pop to the loo, come back into a corridor, and they're all having their own meeting. And so, best way to get people to talk to you about what they're thinking is obviously having a one-to-one conversation. And nowadays, the best way to do that is on the telephone. But the way to find out how they're feeling is really important, because we can find out how they're feeling, we can help address any fears, concerns they have. For some people, it's, I've got children at home. What am I going to do with my children if I come back to work? You know, can my child that doesn't attend the nursery with me, because you've had a policy that my child can't attend my nursery, can my child attend my nursery? And the policy, if you don't have the conversation with your provider, with your manager or your owner, you don't get a chance to say, well, I've got a childcare issue, but I'd be quite happy to bring my child with me, but you've never allowed us to have our children at the nursery. Can we do that? Oh yeah, of course you can. We can do that. That's no problem at all. We can do that. And obviously, because these are exceptional times. Or somebody might have say, well, I've got childcare in place, as you know, but it's with my mum. And, you know, that's not going to be perhaps something we would want people to do, to be looking after children in homes and stuff. Mum's not necessarily so great. And is that a good idea? Well, you can bring your child to nursery. Well, maybe I've got a child who goes to school. Well, has the school not said that you were a key worker and that they would make available a space for your child to be in school and to be receiving childcare in school until the school reopens properly? Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Well, maybe we can help you do that. I mean, there are letters that employers are writing to their staff schools, making the point that that member of staff is a key worker. And being back in their nursery, you're able to serve the children of key workers, vulnerable children, and have more children attending nursery as permitted, as allowed, to obviously help the economy. So, you know, some people just need, you know, a bit of help and support. And if you don't have a conversation, you don't get to find out what they're feeling, and you don't get to then be able to say, oh, I've got an answer to that problem that you think, or we've got a solution, let's explore the solution.
And it's a time, I think that's really so key. It's a time for real leadership, isn't it? It's a time to stand up and be a leader in that sense. And as you say, we've talked a little bit, and I know you talk a little bit in your document about things like questionnaires to get maybe potentially an anonymized view of how people are feeling. But those one-on-one conversations, that's where the real quality comes in. And you've got to be making time for those right now to get that feedback.
We've got to be sensitive, Matt. I mean, some of the staff will be having a horrible time at home. I know some people will come back with amazing tans and tell you the garden looks fantastic and their house has never been cleaner, but some people are struggling to get out of their beds. And we must be really sensitive to the staff that are having a different situation, a different experience to perhaps our people around us. Some people will have suffered bereavement. Some people will have suffered anxiety. Some people will have lost people because they didn't get treatment because of the concerns over COVID. You know, people will have lost people, not just because of COVID, but because people lose people anyway. And they've been out of your line of sight for potentially up to 8-9 weeks. So we've got to be sensitive, and we've got to be leading with, how are you today? How are you? You know, and sometimes people say, you know, how are you? And they mean it as a gesture. As leaders now, we've got to mean it, and we've got to wait for the answer. I love it when you see the presenters sometimes when they're speaking to the GPs on these breakfast shows, and they say, you know, and how are you? And I think that makes a real difference. You know, we're about to learn something from that GP, but the first thing the presenter asks the GP is, and how are you? How are you doing? How's the family doing? Are you staying safe? Because that's what how we show that we really care. And as leaders, there's never been a more important time to do that.
Fabulous. I think I absolutely I had a point here that I think we've been talking a lot in a few of our conferences about the importance of making sure that you understand that children will have had a different experience. Some children will have had a really great time with their parents at home, and some will have maybe had a much more difficult time, potentially even traumatic time. We've got to take the same approach to staff, don't we, to recognize that not everyone's going to have had the same experience in lockdown. So what are some of the things that you would recommend to make sure that we can identify and look out for those staff, both when we start to come back into the setting, but also when we're over, you know, digital, over Zoom, whatever it might be, to make sure that we can see those staff who might be having need a little bit more of our support right now?
Yeah. Have you not seen that joke, Matt, where there's a cat and a dog, and the dog says that, you know, basically you're at home because you love me, and I love that you're at home with me, and the cat says you've lost your job and you're the loser I've always you know, that's the difference for some people, isn't it? Some people are having an amazing thoughts about being at home, and some children are absolutely having a thriving moment because of this. others are really struggling. We've got to obviously find out where our staff are and what they're thinking. And we've, in terms of your question, just repeat that last little bit of your question
No,
again.
just wondering whether you had any ways to make sure that we really do can focus in on those staff, and ways of perhaps identifying, I suppose, those staff, because it might not be that how are you, as you say, always gets answered in the most truthful way if it's maybe in a big group staff meeting or so on.
Correct. Yeah, and don't take someone's lack of contact to be that they're being funny with you. You know, I don't want to be technically HR with you, but some staff can be a bit funny with their boss. So don't think that they're being funny by not responding to your messages. Don't think they're being funny because they've took themselves off the WhatsApp group. Don't take that as being they've just kicked you in the teeth moment. And it's very easy for us to be really super sensitive. We talk about sensitivity, but we are as business owners under a huge amount of stress and pressure, and we've got to recognize that in ourselves. So we might not be the best people to respond. You know, if you're going to get a text from a staff member at 11:30 at night saying, look, I'm really struggling with the thought of returning to work, guess what? Don't respond at 11:45 at night. Because, you know, you might say something that doesn't make it better, but makes it worse because you're tired, you've got your own stresses and your own problems. You know, don't take someone's lack of interest in coming back to work to mean that they're being funny with you as an employer. Some people are really troubled and really struggling. I always think, well, who's the best person to reach out to that person? If you were doing supervisions at work, which would be the member of your management team that would get the best outcome from that supervision? Get them to go and give them a Tim virtual hug. Get them to reach out to them, you know, checking in with their mates. If, you know, we might be speaking to Ellie today on the telephone, having a one-to-one with Ellie and seeing how she's getting on. And you know for an absolute fact that at work, Ellie and Chloe are absolutely thick as thieves, really good pals, really, you know, spark off each other. You might say to Ellie, you know, have you had a chat with Chloe this week? How's she doing? And you're not breaking any confidences. But if she's like, oh, no, I haven't spoken to her, I don't know where she is, raises bells that these people might be struggling, because it might be normal to sort of keep your employer at arm's reach, but when you're keeping your best buddies at work at arm's reach, that should ring bells that these people might need more help. And you can tell people that you care in a variety of ways, whether it's just you don't expect a response, but just wanted to know that I was thinking of you. We're all needing to be kind, aren't we? And, you know, just a little text from the line manager to say, you know, you're in my thoughts, I haven't heard from you, I hope you're okay, could be just what that person needs to open and read today.
I love that. And I think there's definitely that. We've talked a lot already on this session, a little bit about, we have some people who've had a fantastic time, but also maybe to, you know, you kind of ideal candidate for coming back. They've had a nice time away from work. They've got some downtime, but they're ready and raring to go and come back to the office. And then people who might have had a really difficult time and they're not ready to come back. And it's about remembering that as managers and as leaders, you're not always the best person to work with that person who's struggling. And it can be that you utilize your staff who are in a stronger position to spread the love and have some of those more informal chats that can actually be important, rather than what can end up, even if you're very close to your team, being a little bit formal when you are, as you say, talking to your boss.
Yeah, I mean, there are formal processes that are going to happen, and there are formal things that employers need to do to lift furlough. You know, that is a formal stage to say, furlough's now lifted for yourselves, you're going to come back to work. You might tell them verbally, but follow it up with a letter, because then you've got the evidence you lifted furlough for those people. But letters are great and useful, but they don't replace speaking to people. And the right people speaking is really important, because they'll get the best outcomes from those conversations. And, you know, just using your power of your knowledge, you know your people better than anybody else. And if a letter is going to make somebody anxious, if you put it in the post, send it as an email and just ring them and to say, just let you know, I'm pinging you an email across, nothing to worry about, but I just wanted you to know that it was going to be in there.
That's great. And then I think on that, just because I kind of round up the conversation a little bit, you say there are some technical considerations to bring people off furlough, whether that's to do with payroll and stuff. Do you maybe just want to have a little talk me through some of those things that it does, the process of taking someone off furlough, to make sure that checklist is just ticked off for people so they don't have to worry too much about those technical considerations?
Yeah, I mean, treat people decently. A minimum amount of notice to lift see people from furlough is 24 hours. Now, if you told me in 24 hours I needed to have my uniform washed, my work shoes found, you know, a pair of tights to pop on, you know, I might struggle. You know, so give people a decent amount of notice to lift furlough. and let them know what's happening. Even if it's a case of saying, we think we're reopening on the 1st, we think we want you to be working 9 till 4 that day, but bear in mind, if as we get closer, we might have to change that plan. And if staff know that a change is possible, they don't react so badly when a change occurs. So be prepared for that. Make sure that you have obviously protected any job retention scheme claim. Someone has to have been furloughed for 3 weeks for you to be able to make a claim. So obviously always look at the staff who have been working for you and make sure that there is if you are going to keep them on furlough, that you keep them for 3 weeks before you lift it again. The minimum period someone needs to be back at work doesn't need to be more than a day before they could be re-furloughed. So don't think that it's always 3-week blocks, because it doesn't really work that way. Make sure that obviously people are ready for you to have a chat with them on their first day, or in the first few days in like a return to work interview style. Make sure that you're ready to brief and train them. They will have forgotten that we sing happy birthday twice when we're washing our hands the 20 seconds, because guess what? Life's got in the way, So show them what you mean by the cleaning and sanitization systems that you've put in place. Show them and teach them. There's some free training people can do on infection control, on COVID, and there's some very low cost training people can do on infection control. Give them the skills, give them the confidence, equip them with what they need to know, and you'll have a much better reboard and transition back to work than you might otherwise have.
But that's good to know as well, that you can have that conversation of maybe erring on the side of caution about actually taking someone off furlough, and prepare them, and then maybe use that 24-hour clause, knowing that they probably think it's going to happen anyway. But the difficulty is, once you've taken someone off, you don't want to have to go through that process of putting that back on again if the goalposts move a little bit.
Yeah, correct. And I think, to say to somebody, look, we think we're working for this date, so could you get ready for that, because I'd like you back, then that's great. But then let them know that you might need to change that plans, because as I say, nobody can be sure that we will have a green light on the 1st. I mean, we're recording this, on the 19th? The 20th? I don't even know the week. We're recording this on the 20th. Nobody really knows that we will be back on the 1st. It is a plan, but I think until the morning of the 1st, who knows?
One final question I just
wanted... Surprise me now, Matt. I know.
This may all be redundant by tomorrow. Who knows? One just last question I wanted to ask you before we round things off is, I think there are also some difficult HR associated issues that could come up over the next little while. Things like holiday leave, asking people to take or not take holiday leave, potentially changing people's work hours, and of course the idea that potentially there could be some layoffs that might need to happen if you can't get your setting back to the right kind of capacity that you want. How are you kind of thinking, and I'm advising that managers and leaders are looking at some of those things right now to make sure they're prepared for those more difficult conversations?
Yeah, don't do anything without seeking advice from your HR provider. It is too important. Don't have the conversation, make plans, start talking to people, and then reach out to the support you have. Make sure you reach out first early doors, because HR providers can really help you with your thought process and your reasoning behind that. Once you've pressed the button on redundancy, once you've pressed the button on telling people that are going to go on to short time, you damage that psychological contract if you then go, oh, I didn't mean to. Oh, I've changed my mind. So really know what you're doing and take advice beforehand as to what is the best strategy for you and your business for the foreseeable future. Because, we can't guarantee that things will be back to normal in September. And I think when all this started in March, we thought that perhaps, we were okay for September. Who knows now whether we'll be back to normal this year. So we've got to, any plans you're putting in place need to be carefully constructed and carefully crafted to give you an impact for as long as it needs to have, really. So do always take advice first. There, tricky things are definitely redundancies, short time, and laying people off if that's what you have to do. Holiday shouldn't be tricky. We are now well into what should be a holiday season for every provider. Me included as a small business, we should be well into holiday season. And they did say on the 17th of April that you could use holiday whilst you're on furlough. I think in the first few weeks, it would be really quite negative for employers to have made staff take holiday, not knowing how long lockdown would last and how long restrictions would last. But now we know it's gone on for as long as it has, and there's no great news that things are going to return to normal in the near future. It is reasonable for an employer to give their employee notice to take holiday. and I will advise employers to do that whilst furlough is around. So get your staff to be sent a letter to tell them to take some holiday, give them the double the amount of notice that you have to give them for the holiday they're to take, and obviously just top it up so they get 100% of their normal pay for the time that they're on holiday.
That's fantastic. I think you're probably right. I think as we go further into the holiday season, we can all be aware that those flights to Lanzarote are probably not happening anytime soon, sadly.
Sadly.
Imogen, that's great. Thank you so much. I just think to finish off, I just wanted to talk a little bit about this wonderful reboarding pack that you've put together. I've had a little look at a section of it, and it's absolutely wonderful. Do you maybe want to tell people where they can find that and where they can find out a little bit more about Red Wing and what the work that you guys are doing right now?
Absolutely. Red Wing is a little bird, a bit like the thrush. Thrush Solutions would not have been a good company years ago. But if you head along to our website, redwing-solutions.co.uk, you will go to our shop page. If you're looking to buy one of our resources, you can just put the word reboarding into our search engine. Funnily enough, there's not lots of products called reboarding, so it'll only ever take you to our one product, which is the reboarding pack at £39. But you'll find from the website lots of information about all the services we provide to early years. You can apply to have a quote for retained HR support. If you are lacking in HR support, you can even buy just a 20-minute telephone call from our shop site so that you can speak to a consultant and get some advice targeted to your business.
Fantastic. That sounds wonderful. And thank you so much for joining us today, Imogen. I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.